Hello, good morning. Welcome to the Dailies on Echo Television, where we keep you updated with the happenings from the front page of the Nigerian newspaper. Quite a number of stories and events have happened, among which we're seeing that it's still concerning the 2025 appropriation bill, where we're seeing that Senate is, trying to grill ministers and ministries to see what will be for the budget. So all fingers crossed. We hope that you can follow us along by dropping your comment and your views on Facebook. I am Sana Elisha Dashom, and I'll be doing this together with Rachel. Good morning.
Morning, Sally.
All right, we will be running through the papers, starting with the New Telegraph newspaper.
On the New Telegraph, the first story, funds repatriation, CBN moves to bar extension for export proceeds. Tariff hike, telcos seek implementation in first quarter. You can find details on page 8. What I told Tinubu OT during my visit, a statement from Senator Kalu. Sanwo-Olu signs 3.366 trillion naira 2025 budget into law for Lagos State. You can find details on page 4. Ohaneze Indibo election, I will hand over to Rivers Indigenous, statement from Chukwu. U.S. Embassy Consulate in Nigeria shut down temporarily. That is to celebrate Jimmy Carter's life. You can find details on page 4 and 6. The big story on the paper, Tinubu seeks China's support for Nigeria's Permanent Security Council bid. Demands increase in $2 billion currency swap deal. Seeks upward review of $50 billion aid package for Africa. China to train 6,000 military personnel, 1,000 police officers for African countries. You can find details of the big story on page 2. 2025 appropriation bill, Senate grills ministers and heads of agencies. The writer says Wale Edun begs for closed-door session on fuel subsidy proceeds as upper chamber orders NOA and ANDGs to represent proposals. Borno military base attack, take war to terrorists, bandits cap president orders army. Direct thorough probe of incident, federal government rejects foreign mercenaries. You can find details on page 2 and 8. Reps decry poor budgetary releases to environment ministry. We have minimum wage will be reviewed in less than 2 years, says the minister. You can find details on page 7. And we have a study that says childhood maltreatment might alter sperm and impact future generations' brain development. You can find this study on page 27, and that's all the news on New Telegraph newspaper.
On this, Nigeria Reps Committee decries poor funding of Environment Ministry. The big story on the paper, federal government orders probe of killing of soldiers in Borno Army base. Tinubu tasked military to proactively take war to the camps of the bandits and terrorists. Urgently tackled influx of bandits in the southwest, Afenifere challenges. Governors, you can do well to find out on page 4 and 15. Finance Minister Edu begs senators for closed session on subsidy savings debt servicing. On insecurity, Nigeria partners China in local production of military equipment. The picture story we're seeing tears losses as fire ravages Los Angeles, USA. We can see a cross-section of the picture, smokes and showing the fire that took place. This happened on Wednesday. So if you want to know what's happening there, do well to flip through the paper and then see more detail of any of the story. And that's all on This Day in Nigeria.
On Nigerian Tribune, House Security Operative Boss ISWAPs plan to establish camps in Oyo. Camp meant to coordinate activities in Oyo, Kwara, and Osun. On fuel subsidy proceeds, Finance Minister demands closed-door meeting with lawmakers. You can find details on page 4. However, the question is, what is the federal government trying to hide from Nigerians knowing fuel subsidy savings so far? Fuel subsidy wasn't secretly removed. However, Nigerians have been expectant to know what exactly have we saved and what is the future of oil in this country, the price, production, and all of that. And for some reason, we have Wale Edun saying, you know what, when we come to the point where we need to talk about fuel subsidy savings and what the government have been able and debt servicing, we should have a closed-door meeting. And whether we like it or not, it's is a red flag. We have our eyebrows raised because, I mean, what do you mean by it being closed door? You don't want Nigerians to know how much have been saved. It only gives room for more corruptions, Nigerians being in the dark, lack of transparency and accountability, and Nigerians are out there having an outrageous fuel pump price, diesel, nothing to write home about, and all of that. And for some reason, you don't want Nigerians to know how much they have saved for the sacrifice that they have accepted to say, you know what, we will buy petrol at 1,000 naira, we will buy petrol at 900 naira, fine, take out the subsidy. And for some reason, when it's time for Nigerians to know what have we saved so far and to know if we are making progress, you don't want us to know about it. And it is heartening on a lot of level. And I know Nigerians will speak about it, but in the end, we also have senators that might want it closed door. It would be a welcome idea for them, because we know when it comes to money, we are on a different level of corruption and transparency in this country.
You know, Rachel, while you were mentioning, I just can't help. I think if there's something over the years I've been concerned is the fact that we do not have what we call check and balance at all when it comes to our three arms of government, whereby you have where the executive will check with the legislature to be sure you're doing your work. The legislature will check with the executive, hope you're doing your work, as well as even the judiciary. And then just like you said here, we are looking forward to where we'll have lawmakers. I say, you know what, we clearly remember at the beginning, we told Nigerians, okay, for the first 2 months, it was even on our papers.
Yes.
This is what we're able to save. And then after that day or after that paper, we never heard anything again coming from our government regarding how much had been saved. And then we kept seeing the president coming out to say, please endure, please endure. And Nigerians have been enduring. I clearly remember yesterday saying that in as much as we want our leaders to be accountable, we want to be good followers. But how can you help us to be good followers? We want to ask you certain questions and then you don't want to tell us how much. We saw yesterday even the Manufacturers Association talking about our debt servicing, how much it was till the present amount. We are looking at twice the amount we are actually owing compared to when Buhari was in power. So right now, I think the concern will be we want to know what's happening. I clearly remember when we were talking about those who were financing terrorists, and then till today, we saw where very few names were being mentioned. The rest went under the carpet, and then they said they're going to be tried secretly. And I said, why? The killings were done publicly, so why would you try them? What are we hiding? We heard that the names of former governors, former this, former that, and all of that. I mean, we have nothing to hide. We should make it open to the Nigerians to know, you know what, we're having a government that really care about us. So just like you said, well, it looks like it's a red flag, but then let's wait and see if the senators will prove us wrong and eventually make it open before everybody.
Still on Nigerian Tribune, over 120 million workers globally at risks of redundancy. This is coming from the World Economic Forum. Human rights community named Oyebanji 2024 Governor of the Year. The big story on Nigerian Tribune is on tax reform bills. Northern stakeholders demand VAT reduction to 3%. The writer says call for relocation of corporate headquarters of banks, telecom companies to Abuja. Stress risks factor for high blood pressures and sudden death. This is a report coming from a cardiologist. You might find details on page 5 and take those details seriously. Court remands Lagos teacher sets bill at 200,000 naira for assaulting 3-year-old pupil. Southwest leads in proportion of wage earners with postgraduate education in 2023, a report from the NBS. Oyo makes move to choose new Alafin. You can find details on page 2. The writer says Commissioner summons LG chairman and kink makers. Federal government rejects foreign mercenaries in tackling insecurity. Seeks partnership with China for military equipment production. You can find details on page 3. That's all the news on Nigerian Tribune.
Let's take a look at the Punch newspaper. General hydrocarbons account frozen amid 225 million debt dispute with First Bank, data found on page 12. Afenifere Igbo who offers support as police squad combat the Southwest bandits. Power stagnates at 4,500 megawatts despite $3.23 billion loans, data found on page 19. Nigeria-China planned collaboration on military training, arms production. China announces CNY 1 billion grant for Nigeria, others to train over 7,000 military personnel. That's talking about 1 billion China currency. Do well to find more detail of that on page 2. Biden, Trump, others pay tribute as U.S. buries Carter. You can find that story in the paper. Senate grills Finance Ministry over subsidy savings. You can find that on page 12. Man jailed 2 years for defrauding America of $345,000. Sanwo-Olu signed 3.36 trillion naira 2025 budget, opens 5 routes. You can read that on page 6, and that's all on the Punch newspaper.
On this day newspaper, Sanwo-Olu signed 3.36 trillion naira 2025 appropriation bill into law, assures Lagosians of 95% performance. On insecurity, Nigeria opposes use of foreign mercenaries to battle insurgency and banditry. Concerns mount over Garaku, First Bank share prices and financial statements. You can start details on the front page. The big story on this day, court restrains First Bank over GHL. We have Otedola, others face arrest. The writer says oil firm to sue for $1 billion damages over bank's alleged breach of contract. More shareholders oppose bank's private placement. 2025 budget drama in Senate as Finance Minister demands closed session with lawmakers. We have a picture story with the caption Tinubu receives Chinese foreign minister, and that's all the news on this day newspaper.
On the Guardian newspaper, talking about insecurity, Afenifere alert Southwest governors as experts tackle federal government on terrorism funding. Lagos lowers FAC expectation, targets 2.3 trillion naira IGR. Northern groups seek reopening of land borders. You can find that story on page 7. And then we have the big story, pediatric nutrition. Health concern over affordability, safety, and quality of infant meals. And we have the picture showing the baby food and the inflation that's actually affecting. You know, I saw a picture of a father that decided to get all the containers of the baby food he got for the child before the child could even reach a year. And then he was saying, just look at the child and then look at the money I'm spending. And you really agree with me that talking about the meals for infants is quite expensive. Not even talk about their diapers or their pampers that you have to buy for them and all of that. And then here we're seeing concerns are actually rising, where we see that parents right now have to resort to alternative of how they will be able. I mean, if you go according to, health-wise, you're supposed not to feed the child with anything until from 6 months. But with the way things are, parents can no longer afford to keep breastfeeding.
Yes.
In fact, they start looking for alternative. What you should start eating from 3 months old. You see a baby's ready swallowing eba and the rest of it. So, I mean, it's really that's the situation we have found ourselves in Nigeria, and then parents have to look for a way to survive, and then as well as their words. But I'm hoping that maybe with time, I don't know when, I don't know how, but I'm hoping that maybe the quality of the meals will not drop. Now, of course, I know parents decide to maybe like the Tom Brown we have for the soya beans and all that is quite healthy, yes. But then you also have to look for a way to make sure that you feed the child very well so that the child doesn't get malnutrition. So and all of that, but that is what it is presently.
And it's also unfortunate that there are some breastfeeding mothers that cannot breastfeed, not because they are too busy, not because they have work to go to, not because they don't want to, but they can't. And they have to depend on formula for the baby to be able to get the required nutrients from that infant level. And formula is expensive, Sele. It's very, very expensive. You will break bank if you must afford formula because you cannot breastfeed, because it is the only approved alternative if you cannot breastfeed for whatsoever health challenge you're going through as a mother that cannot breastfeed her child. And then we can talk about even the Tom Brown seller, it's not even advisable for a child below 6 months
6 months.
because you are not a pediatrician, you don't know how to measure the quantity of energy the child needs, the fat, the protein,
Carbohydrate
the
and the rest.
vitamins. You
All
do
the
not have
classes.
all of those equipment to you're not a food scientist, and even if you're a food scientist, you're not a pediatric, so you could know what adults could consume, but you don't know what
What?
babies need because they develop differently.
Differently.
So even the Tom Brown that is an alternative is not even safe for a child below 6 months. Is either the breast milk or the formula or the already produced food that you know it's approved and health wise by doctors and all of that, that these are the food that the baby can eat within that period of time. Any other thing else could be for a child that is above 6 months and all of that. So yes, the country is not easy for anybody at whatever level, whether you are a parent or not, a breastfeeding mother or not. It's
Inflation
crazy
is
out
telling
there.
on
Inflation is on
everything.
everything and on everybody. But let's look at how some things in the market are going down because the dollar went a little bit low as of December, but we do not know what it will be for January. We don't know what it will be for the months ahead. And I know that, of course, when it comes to food, food inflation is on another level. There are other products that you could go and see a 50 naira, 100 naira, or even 200 naira difference. It's not that significant, but we are seeing a drop. But I don't know for food in the market, most especially when it comes to pediatric nutrition. That's an entirely different ball game. But of course, we will pray that God will provide for the experience, of course, to feed their child, because we've talked about stunted growth and it starts from in infancy and all of that. So we hope the best for parents out
Of
there.
course, of course. Well, still on the Guardian newspaper, Senate erupts as Edo seek executive session on fuel subsidy proceed. We have budgets for, I take that story again, budget for 2025 budget demands breakdown of TET fund NJC education. You can find that on page 3. Court summon minister AGF over expatriate levy implementation. And then you can do well to read that story on page 28. Talking about boundary, federal government sues for peace as Abia Cross River renew hostility. MBS to unveil rebase GDP this month, takes 2019 as base year. There's some business you can find on page 19, and that's all on the Guardian newspaper.
On Blueprint newspaper, the big story, Tinubu seeks increase in $2 billion China-Nigeria currency swap. The writer says $50 billion pledge to Africa's infrastructure inadequate. Nigeria will domesticate production of military equipment. Statement from the minister, we won't tolerate foreign interference in Africa. This is a statement from China. You can start with the details on the front page and continue on page 8. 19 terrorists killed as Boko Haram attacks Chad's presidential palace. British pound sterling falls to 1 year low amid fiscal and inflation concerns. On NSC, massive posting rocks federation. This is for sports. You can find details on page 32. Northern stakeholders demand VAT reduction to 3%, seeks relocation of headquarters of banks and telecoms to Abuja. National Assembly tackles ministers, NDAs at 2025 budget defense, NOA, NAN to represent budgetary proposals. Still on Blueprint newspaper, my performance will speak for me, Governor Yusuf is saying. Equity market gains 793 billion naira. Teacher arraigned over alleged assault on the 3-year-old pupil, and that's all the news on Blueprint newspaper.
All right, before we go further with the people review, I'd love us to take a break at this moment so we can let you share the story. What do you feel about the approach coming from the Minister of Finance talking about a closed door meeting regarding what was realized from the first subsidy as well as our debt servicing? And then other stories as well that are making the rounds on the paper. So when we come back, we will continue on the paper review. Please stay tuned with us. thanks for staying tuned in still the dailies. We have been looking at a number of stories on the paper. We saw what is happening regarding the 2025 appropriation bill, as well as we are seeing moves coming from the House senators, where we're seeing that the Minister of Finance is seeking for a closed-door meeting to actually state what was recovered from the first subsidy removal, as well as we are also looking at debt servicing. Of course, we saw one of the papers talking about feeding for infants, where we're seeing that inflation is really telling hard on parents, and then it's quite difficult for them to meet up with the required nutrition that the children need. So these are another stories that would have been on the paper. Please do well to drop your comment and your views regarding what you feel about all of these events happening and unfolding in the country. I still have Rachel with me. Thank you, Rachel.
You're welcome, Sarah.
All right, let's take a look at the next paper, which happens to be the Friday Leadership newspaper. Leadership award is very important to me, coming from the Environment Minister. You can read that on page 29. CBN suspend extension of export proceeds repatriation. You can find that on page 19. Trending, we're seeing federal government under pressure to dump food import. On numbers, China approved $254.76 million to loan for Kanu-Kaduna Railway project. And then the big story, intercepted 59 minors. Kano senator stop trafficking probe. Says it's at Marjorie Affairs, a movement which Rachel stated yesterday. But even at that, we complained about the means of transportation, and then looking at their number, and then we saw it was a minibus. And then you could talk about what if one of them suffocate and die as a result of all of this. So the movement is really not safe for them, regardless of whether they are Marjories or not. I mean, the child has a right to breed, has a right for everything. So they are not just animals, cattle that we're transporting from one place to another. So I hope that this is not an excuse whatsoever, whether they are Marjories or not. I hope the senator gets this clear. It's not an excuse. We saw the way they were being moved. Some of them were stuffed. You could see the way they are. So I'm really not happy. I'm getting emotional.
So like even pigs and goats and, you know, chickens get better treatment when being transported. We see all those vans moving with animals and it's well ventilated. That wasn't the case for these children, but you see, we are the one passionate and feeling that way concerning them. I don't think the people transporting them have these emotions like you and I concerning their safety and all of that. It's all about getting them to where they need to get them, and the comfort doesn't matter. Just as we have it saying it's our Marjorie affair and movement, and he's telling you indirectly, well, that's how you move. If you are worried about their mode of transportation, that's your business. If you're worried about whether they're being treated in an inhuman way or what, that's your concern. But it doesn't, we'll still put our voice out there and say, you know what, doesn't matter, is your Marjorie movement, fine. But can these children just get better treatment next time when on transit?
Of course, we can even see another writer here saying the police is saying we only want the children reunited with their families, and I think it's very important, just like we stated yesterday. They have parents, so they should be reunited with their parents. I remember there was during the Goodluck Jonathan's regime where we had that Marjorie school, and I'm wondering what's happening. There was a physical building to actually make sure that these children go to school. So what's happening? Is it that this administration that are coming from Buhari to this present administration is not having plans of, you know, doing anything about that school, or what really? We need answers regarding that, because if they were in school, I mean, right now, I know some schools have resumed. On Monday, others will join, so they should be in school. So I'm really not happy with this senator's reply. But let's keep our fingers crossed and see what will happen. Still on Friday Leadership, your policy is not working, Bauchi governor tells Tinubu. You can find that on page 7. 19 killed as terrorists attack Chad presidential palace. You can find that on page 8. We have picture story where we can see some of these children. We have Sadiu, we have Isa, and then we have Nana, who were abducted from Bauchi and sold for 2 million naira in Anambra State at the government house in Bauchi yesterday. Very innocent kids. You could see them with their soft drinks seated. They have no idea what's happening. We hope that you can see that story on page 15, as well as drop your voice and your own comment regarding this. And that's all on Friday Leadership.
On Daily Independent newspaper, the first story is the NCDC saying that no HMPV in Nigeria. We are on alert, commence testing. And then we have the World Health Organization insisting that the HMPV is not new.
Of course.
Advices against travel bans. You can start with the details on the front page. Sanwo-Olu signs 3.36 trillion naira 2025 appropriation bill into law, says budget will build on past gains, scale up impact for future. Lagos Internal Revenue Service has crossed 1 trillion naira in IGR. This is a report coming from the Assembly, and we can always say kudos to Lagos State. The big story on the paper, security challenges, hiring foreign mercenaries, not an option, a statement from the federal government. It has never been an option, and I don't think it should be an option to be considered anytime soon. The writer says to work with China in domesticating production of military equipment. Tinubu urges China to increase $2 billion currency swap deal with Nigeria. China backs Nigeria expanding currency swap line, issuing Panda bond. You can find details on the front page. Okpebholo accuses suspended LG chairman of squandering over 83 billion naira. Take battle to bandits, terrorist camps. Tinubu charges Nigerian army rather than sitting down and having barracks and military base being attacked. I think it's important that the strategy for the military should be to take the war to the terrorists. You can find details on page 6. Still on Daily Independent, Mba signs land use regulation, executive order creating new urban areas. Influx of bandits, Afenifere urges Southwest governors to prioritize security. 2025 budget, Defense Finance Minister panics as Senate probes revenue from subsidy cut. The last story on the paper, cargo demand declines in Africa by 0.7% in November, climbs worldwide. You can find details on page 6. So while we are having an increase worldwide, in Africa we are having a 0.7 decline in November 2024. And that's all the news on Daily Independent newspaper.
On the Daily Times newspaper, China-Nigerian relations, why Tinubu call for currency swap strengthening. You can do well to read that he has urged China to increase the $2 billion currency swap agreement with Nigeria to accelerate trade and infrastructural development during meeting with the Chinese Foreign Affairs Minister. So you can do well to read more detail of what is happening regarding the relationship. The big story is regarding First Bank, why stakeholders want to take dollar out. You can read why they do. On 2025 budget, National Assembly seek more funding for capital budget, which we've been seeing that they actually faulted and we're not happy regarding what the recurrent expenditure is getting in comparison to what the capital budget is getting. So you can do a read more detail of that in the paper. Threat to life, you lied, Ganduji tells Peter Obi. You can find that in the paper. NUJ condemns attack on Sun newspaper correspondent at the PDP secretariat. Regarding Bauchi flood, Tuga advises communities to clear drainages. I think the right time to do that is now before the rains will come in. Please do make ways for the water. And then with the last story here is regarding NOA raise alarm over emerging human metapneumovirus. You can do well to read detail of that, and that's all on Daily Times newspaper.
On the Matrix newspaper, CBN cancels approval of extension of export proceeds repatriation. Mandate repatriation of proceeds of oil, non-oil exports within 180 days and 90 days. Everton sack Sean Dyche after poor Premier League run. You can find details on page 22. Peter Obi raises fresh alarm. Assigning insecurity, says frequent kidnapping in Nigeria worrisome, needs urgent attention. Lagos Governor Sanwo-Olu signs budget estimate of 3.366 trillion naira for 2025. The big story on the Matrix, China-Nigeria pact. Tinubu demands increase in $2 billion currency swap deal, says it will speed up infrastructural development, deepen strategic bilateral relations, demand upward review of $50 billion aid package for Africa. Memorandum of understandings between Nigeria, China at various stage of implementation, statement from Tugar. You can find details of this statement on page 2. If Nigeria can't work as one, let's separate. A statement from Sunday Igboho. Northern Governor supports Tinubu's tax reform, seeks better understanding. Governor Sule still insisting concerning the misunderstanding between Northern governors and the tax policy committee. You can find details on page 8. Teacher suspended for assaulting 3-year-old pupil in Ikorodu. We have an entertainment story. You can find details on page 23, and also a picture story, President Bola Tinubu decorating his aide-de-camp, Lieutenant Colonel Nuruddin Oluwole Yusuf, with his new rank of colonel at the State House yesterday, and that's all the news on the Matrix newspaper.
On First News newspaper, still talking about what Sunday Buhu is saying, if Nigeria isn't working, let's go our separate ways. And I think it's part of those that are agitating for separation, the Yoruba nation, and we keep saying that together we can fight a common enemy. When we're divided,
China's Gaya Ice Eagles return servers Eyimba resurgence. Algerian club delay Chile's contract termination. Madrid signed Fati. You can find details on page 3. Arsenal ready to revive Isak interest. Van Dijk slams Rev after Spurs defeat. And Juve agree personal terms with Aroja. You can find details on page 3. Still on the transfer window open and players moving from one club to another. Mourinho aims dig at Turkish refs. You can find details on page 3. The big story on the paper, Aston Mutawa exclusive. His statement says every wrestler's dream is to win gold at the Olympics, but the goal below that is to qualify for the Olympics is just such a great feat. My wrestling story. You can find his story on page 6. On Cricket World Cup, Junior Yellow Greens intensify prep in India. Hen discusses potential Fury Joshua bout. You can find details on page 2, and that's all the news on Punch Sports Extra.
On Business Day newspaper, why First Bank shareholders seek to stop strange 350 billion naira private placement. The writer here says CBN completes verification of entire shareholding of Babrika Capital. And then we have Gabriel joins the call for the EGM, where we have outraged shareholders of the First Bank Nigeria, the oldest financial institution, are seeking to stop the shocking bid by Femi Otitola, chairman of the holding company of the bank, to launch a private placement at a time the bank's highest successful right issue has yet to be concluded and shareholders are lotting their shares. You can do well to read more detail on page 31. And then we have First Telecom's tariff hike in 10 years to fuel investment. On the commentary, we have foreign policy and the path to peace in a dangerous neighborhood. You can do well to read that on page 4. The big story, real estate overtakes oil and gas as Nigeria's third largest sector. Where we have crop production, telecoms emerge standalone sector, and then we have rebasing will ensure indicators accurately reflect current economic realities, coming from the NBS CEO. Asia EV bombs soar appetite for Nigeria's oil. You can read that story on page 30. And that's all on Business Day newspaper, as well as how far we can go on the program this morning. Thank you so much, Rachel.
Welcome, Selen.
Thank you to our viewers and every other person who made this program a success. Till we meet again next week, please do have a lovely weekend.